Welcome to the Field Dynamics podcast. We're here to facilitate inspiring dialogues about the nature of consciousness across disciplines, communities, and practitioners, all with a holistic perspective.
From energy healing to somatic therapies, from neuroscience to meditation, we believe the most interesting things happen at the boundaries of disciplines.
I'm Christabel.
And I'm Keith.
Thanks for joining us today and enjoy the episode.
Hello, today we're here with Bruce Berger. In 1978, Bruce Berger founded the Heartwood Institute, once one of the world's leading centers for professional training in massage and somatic psychology. At Heartwood, Bruce has said he participated in a revolution in the understanding and practice of holistic healing and the emergence of energy medicine. He's the author of the exceptional Esoteric Anatomy, The Body as Consciousness, which was published by North Atlantic Books in 1998. In his workshops and trainings, Bruce offers a profoundly effective approach to wellness based on therapeutic presence, polarity therapy, and somatic psychology. Bruce earned a BS from the University of Pennsylvania and an MA from the New School for Social Research. He has been a member of the faculty of the University of Nevada and Rutgers University. He is a longtime student of Indian philosophy and has devoted his life to toppling the dominant materialistic paradigm and articulating an ancient realization of the unity and divinity of all life as an infinite fabric of self-organizing intelligence. Welcome, Bruce. A pleasure, and an honor to have you with us today.
Yes, happy to be here.
All right. So Esoteric Anatomy, the book, as mentioned in your bio, has been a seminal text for both Christabel and myself, alongside a number of others in that field. And in the eventual formation of field dynamics, I'd love to open with a quote from Esoteric Anatomy, if that's all right.
Yes.
You say, this is the quote, "Knowledge of the self is the balm to heal the suffering, which is the driving force of our egocentric way of life." So my question is, what is knowledge of the self and how does that heal our suffering?
Excellent. Thank you. The work that I offer is based on the ancient wisdom of India. And it's an ancient realization of the unity and divinity of all life. In this understanding, first of all, the purpose of knowledge. And here, if you've ever studied Eastern philosophy, Buddhism, or Hinduism, it's all based on a philosophy called Sankhya, and Sankhya means to enumerate. And Sankhya enumerates the basic dynamics that underlie the play of consciousness, that underlies manifestation. And in the first verse, the first sloka of the Sankhya treatises, the first verse says, the purpose of this work is the total, the final, the complete, the permanent annihilation of suffering. So this work is not here to get you a better job, or not here because of any love of philosophy, like European learning. The purpose of this knowledge is the total, the final, the complete, the permanent annihilation of suffering. And there's a system that underlies yoga, which over thousands of years have demonstrated the efficacy of this promise of the total, the final, the complete, the permanent annihilation of suffering. Now, in this understanding, the cause of our suffering is ignorance. And it's not an ignorance of mere book learning of facts, of anything you can find on Google. It's an ignorance on a cellular and molecular level of being attuned to the superficial, transient, external world. And the pain that we're in is from a profound disconnect from being. As a child, I felt this abyss. You know, typically we feel this abyss and feel like there's something terribly, terribly wrong with us, indeed. I looked for it as a sociologist in the world. It was too threatening to look for it within myself in psychology. And then when I couldn't find what I was seeking there as a sociologist, as an academic. I went off to India, spent more than 2.5 years initially living out of a backpack, going from ashram to monastery. Not quite sure what I was looking for, but something that certainly went beyond anything I had been exposed to in the West. So again, your question is, the cause of this suffering is our ignorance of our own inherent divinity. And the resolution of this suffering is this knowledge of our own inherent divinity. In the philosophy of India, the ground state, the absolute, is called Brahman. And Brahman is beyond any description, and yet the sages characterize it as Sat Chitananda, being, consciousness, and bliss. And Brahman is all-pervasive being and all-pervasive consciousness. So in this understanding, you are a part of Brahman, you are a part of being, and you are a part of this same consciousness. In this moment, the fact that you're conscious, I think, therefore I am. So in this case, I am, therefore I think, or kind of two sides of the same coin. So Brahman is an all-pervasive consciousness. There's absolutely no difference between the absolute being and the being in you. There is absolutely no difference between the ground state of consciousness and the consciousness in you. But the problem is that we are just so misenchanted by the glamour of the world around us, and the excitement of the world around us, that we tune into that and we lose our own inherent connection to that mystery, to that ineffability, to our inherent divinity.
The root of the source of this suffering is a misidentification with our true nature.
Yes.
And that true nature is not anywhere else, but is actually here and now, ever present.
Yes. Over the years, we've really been brainwashed by the dominant paradigm. Whenever someone says the word God, we picture these personified images. And what I've come to understand is to treat the life force as God. Treat the life force as God. No other God exists. This is a quote from the great sage Swami Nisargadatta, which means Mr. Natural State. It's important to understand that we live in an ocean of life force. We live in an ocean of life. Just like a fish lives in water, we're living in this ocean of life. That without this breath of life, you're dead in a few minutes. That it's only this breath of life that vitiates, that gives life to this body. In the vision of the ancients, this life is not merely one of our atmospheres, spheres of breath. Atmos is the Greek word of breath. So it's not just that these spheres of life here on this living earth that give us life, but the universe is a living, breathing, conscious being, and that there is a unitive field of omniscient intelligence and omnipresent intelligence that underlies everything. If we think about energy for a moment, whenever we're talking about energy, we're talking about a field. And a field is a dynamic polarity flowing from a source into the field and returning to the source in a cybernetic mechanism to maintain its homeostasis. So every atom is this field we're describing, this cybernetic mechanism that outpictures a stable source, a stable state of homeostasis, interacts with its environment, and takes that experience in and self-corrects, right? So every atom is a cybernetic mechanism and a homeostatic state. And this ability to take in your experience and self-correct is our definition of intelligence, the ability to learn from experience. Now, at the speed of life, this cycle, which Dr. Stone called polarity, as the foundation of life, as the foundation of energy. At the speed of life, we could call this consciousness. Do you hear that? That everything that exists is a self-organizing field that has the ability to take in its relationship to its environment and self-correct. And that this is the basis of every atom, every molecule, every cell, every organism in creation is a self-organizing, self-correcting field. This is the definition of life, that life has the ability to self-correct, to self-create. So we're talking about this dynamic. So when I talk about intelligence, I'm talking about the fundamental nature of energy, that all energy is a fabric of self-organizing intelligence. So it's very interesting because when you go into the Vedas, when you go into the Upanishads, they have more words for consciousness than Eskimos have words for snow. And the word that the sages use again and again and again to describe this presence, this cognizance, this awareness, this mindfulness is intelligence. That we live in a fabric of intelligence. So in the microcosm, in the macrocosm, so we're talking about now in the microcosm, the atom, the molecule, the cell, that anything that exists is this cybernetic mechanism. Now, the thing is, when we think about an atom or a molecule or a cell, we're thinking about a field that isn't a thing, but is a fabric of information, that what that field is information about the status of points on that field and the dynamic of that field and feedback of that field, that field is nothing but intelligence. Hear that? So this self-organizing intelligence in whatever construct we want to picture as eternity has manifested all of these forms of consciousness which we picture as the macrocosm. So the same intelligence is what you experience as lucidity, as cognizance, as presence, as yourself. Again, all of this is changing. The only thing that's real, the only thing that's unchanging is your cognizance, is your presence. Life goes before you, but from your first wail as a child to your last gasp on your deathbed, you have been present in your experience as a constant. Now, the most interesting thing about this lucidity of this cognizance, what sages in the East, in India, they have 1,000, no, 300,000, no, 3 million names of God or goddess. And yet the name the sages use the most is yourself. And that is because it is this same divine intelligence, which is the cognizance in you. So we're talking about this molecular intelligence, which in the macrocosm is the lucidity which you're experiencing in this moment. And it's the same lucidity in you, it's in you and you and you and I. And in fact, this presence is unborn, undying, everywhere, always eternal, forever and ever and ever. And you and I are the flowering and the fruiting on this tree of eternal life, of this eternal present. So a revolution has happened in our lifetime in the West, which is an awareness that the essence of healing is this presence. Dr. Stone pointed to it, but he doesn't have the clarity that we have today about the nature of the self. He didn't have the clarity. Like he says, the first rule of polarity therapy, the first principle of polarity therapy is to understand that you haven't affected a healing unless you've addressed the self, unless you've reconnected the field with its source in the self. That's our first rule. So polarity therapy, for example, is unique as a healing art for the intention to address the self, the intention to address this inherent divinity on the molecular and cellular level. And it addresses this holistically, that everything about our lifestyle either takes us into a state of soul communion, what we call sattva guna, or draws us away from our inherent divinity into a state of ignorance. So the ignorance is a quality of being, not information. I hope that was somewhat clear.
Oh, it's incredible, Bruce. It's wonderful to hear you talk about this this revolution, as you phrased it. I'd like to step back a moment, if that's okay, to the Bruce that arrived in India with his rucksack. It's something both Keith and I have done. We've both spent time in ashram in India. I'm fascinated. Esoteric anatomy has been celebrated for integrating Oriental and Ayurvedic concepts in a really innovative way. It's something we strive to do in our own way in our EHT program. Can you share a little bit about how that process unfolded for you of gathering learnings from these various bodies and integrating them, starting with that Bruce in India, who's really, it sounds like the real mindset of the seeker at that point.
Well, this takes us back to our first question. The purpose of the knowledge is the annihilation of suffering. And I went to India because I was in tremendous pain, just rolling in my self-hatred and terror and inadequacy, shame and guilt and fear, and going to India to hide, essentially, in my shame and my guilt and my pain, and not knowing what I was looking for, but guided by a higher intelligence, totally guided. The first time I was teaching at Rutgers University, a colleague mentioned he'd gone to Kathmandu, and suddenly it was like a bee to honey. I immediately made plans to go to Asia. I saw it was a possibility and immediately made plans. And that summer, while I was still teaching at Rutgers, I went off to Burma and India, and saw that was a possibility. And then the following year, I dropped out of the university and I went back to India. All I really had was a desperate desire for liberation. No, not even that, just a desperate desire to escape the pain that I was in. The sages use the word dukkha. That's the word we describe as suffering. And it simply means a bad state. We would describe it, when you think of it, India, you think of poverty, you think of illness. But dukkha is translated as disenchantment. Dukkha is translated as alienation. In the West, we would translate dukkha as shame, as guilt. It's actually a state of ontological terror and ontological alienation, a disconnect from being in your consciousness. So in India, the first really dramatic shift for me was, I remember I was in the Theosophical Society in Chennai, and just such searching, going from ashram to ashram, and somebody said, "Well, you seem like the kind of person who you'd benefit from seeing Osho." So I went up to Mumbai and we started to hang out around Osho's apartment in those days. He didn't have an ashram. He was just a sage with seeing people in his apartment there in a high rise. And then he offered a camp somewhere, and I went off to this camp. And after a day or two, I had no idea what was going on. I went for a personal interview with him. And I remember going in there and he said, "What are you here for?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Get the hell out of here. Come back when you do." So I ended up in a meditation course with Goenka. It was one of his first meditation courses in India. He had been a Hindu who'd found in Burma, who'd found a Buddhist teacher who taught him Vipassana, and it had transformed his health and his life. And at this point in time, his mother had become ill back in India. So he'd come back to India to organize a course to teach his mother this life-saving, health-giving technique called Vipassana, this ancient Buddhist technique of working with presence in the healing arts, in which you would just to sweep your consciousness through your body, creating a feedback loop to presence. And it's a fundamental meditation in the largest part of the Buddhist community, the Theravadan community. But that was my first, in the West, I'd been a hollow drum, just what you call an other-directed person, only living for the images that were reflected back of me by others. I had no internal compass, no real awareness or connection with being. And so while Goenka didn't language it in those terms, what I began to experientially experience was tuning into being, tuning into that consciousness, tuning into that presence. I guess they call it mindfulness or awareness in the Buddhist community. But that was like in 1973. And so we chased Goenka around India. In those days, Goenka believed that he didn't want to become a guru. He didn't want to have an ashram. So you would rent a hall and find a caterer, and you would invite him, and he'd come to your town and offer a course. So we went all over India chasing Goenka and eating the finest catered food. And whatever town his devotees arranged a course.
They're incredibly powerful retreats, Bruce. It's actually something Keith and I recommend occasionally to our students as a process. I've done two of them myself, the 10-day retreats. As you said, just that process of learning to sweep the consciousness through the body and just learn to sit for that many hours a day is fundamentally just, I don't know, I found it quite incredibly transformative at that stage in my process. I'd love to go back and do another.
Yes. But, as powerful as it was, I found that I was really too damaged to be a Vipassana meditator. My mind was too much of a zoo. My heart mind was just too unstable. And I needed a much more holistic approach to healing. And that's what we've discovered at Heartwood, or discovered, Dr. Stone's approach to healing is eclectic. At different points in your evolution, you're guided to different methodologies, and you trust your guidance, as you seek out your own journey, your own unique evolutionary journey.
So that's a really good seg in a sense, we've gone from the oneness to the field of energy, information, intelligence, self-organizing principle, all the way down to what's appropriate for each person in their process organically to come to, right? And in a sense, we all land with the body, in that we're familiar with the body. We know what the physical body is. That's where everybody can agree. There it is. There's the physical body. It exists. We can see it, right? And in polarity therapy, in esoteric anatomy, you describe a lot of the importance of the working with the body. In particular, I was wondering if we could zoom in and highlight one of the aspects that seems quite emphasized in polarity therapy, and that is the body, and specifically the sacrum and the pelvis and the foundation of the physical body. And maybe if you'd comment a little bit about that, its role in polarity therapy, and in general its importance for our health and vitality.
Great. First of all, I want to just step back one moment, and then I'll get to your really important question that you're asking. It's really important to understand that all there is, everything that moves, is the life breath of a living universe. And in the same way that this breath gets down to every atom of your body, you're an atom in the body of the galaxy. You're a body of the infinite. So everything that moves is a life breath of this living universe and this ultimate intelligence. So everything about your life is part of this sacred evolutionary journey of the cosmos, that you personify an instant of the unfolding of the creative potential, of the creative potency of this great and mysterious ocean of consciousness, which we call God, this ocean of light that we call God. Again, life itself is God. Any attempt to put a concept there is very, very limiting. God is this limitless universal light. Okay, so any concept, any word, any idea we have is too narrow. To attempt to personify God or to attempt to describe is just too narrow, because life itself and all of its incredible majesty and splendor and mystery is this self-organizing intelligence. beginningless.
Right. The Tao that is spoken of is not the Tao.
For sure. But what's important for us here is your life is sacred, and that your dharma, your place in this creation, which if you uphold, it upholds you. Your dharma is to be totally present in the unfolding of your life. So that each of us is the personification of a unique instant of the cosmos, and all of the dynamics of the cosmos in that moment are there in your life and the unfolding of your life. So your life is not merely sacred, but you have a dharma which is to be present in your experience. And everyone, and so your bodily experience is sacred. Your tenderness, your vulnerability, you are made of mystery, and everything about you is your sacred dharma. And life is a process of maturing in your ability to be fully you, safe to be present in your bodily experience. Trauma happens when this presence is overwhelmed. So the body literally contracts and shuts down. And trauma is resolved when someone like a healer holds sacred space and invites us to experience that it's safe to be fully present in our body, and just without experiencing the trauma or understanding it intellectually, just by experiencing it's safe to be present in our body, that present clears and releases the trauma. Because again, our work is to be fully present in our bodily experience. So I wanted to talk about that for a moment to emphasize the power of presence and the role of presence in the healing process, because again, this presence is what we would call God. This is the lucidity, this is the cognizance, this is the intelligence, which is at the heart of life, this self-organizing intelligence. Now, you asked a question about sacrum, and that's very, very important, because as much as we all are mystified by the sacrum and awed by the sacrum, there's some dynamics of the sacrum which aren't usually talked about. In the Sanatana Dharma, the wisdom of ancient India, in Sankhya philosophy, one of the oldest expressions of that wisdom, which we work with today as the foundation of yoga philosophy, the underlying dynamic of creation is what we call the three gunas, which is usually translated as the three qualities. But the word guna comes from a Sanskrit root giri, which describes a vortex, an energy field. So really, when we're talking about the three gunas, we're talking about three fundamental vortices of energy, which on a molecular level define the polarity of sattva, soul communion, being, rajas, attunement with the solar force, the fire of creation, and tamas, the crystallization of consciousness into matter. That energy always moves in this polarity from the source, sattva, being, rajas, fire, creation, expression, yang, and then tamas, yin, lunar, feminine, crystallizing into form. That in every breath, every heartbeat, every dimension of manifestation is moving through these three keynotes of natural and cosmic attunement. I teach that the body is a musical instrument that is attuned to these keynotes. As we breathe, we're taken through a process of natural and cosmic attunement. That musical instruments have always been made of guts and hide. And on a molecular level, as you breathe, the pitch of the fields changes and attunes the body to these keynotes, which cross-culturally and trans-historically, the wisdom of the ancients is based on these elemental harmonics, these elemental keynotes of earth, solidity, water, the medium of life, fire, the creative transformational energy, air, the intelligence, and ether, the space in which these energies play. So these three fundamental forces, these three fundamental still points and points of natural and cosmic attunement are personified in the wisdom of ancient India as sattva is personified as Vishnu and the many incarnations of Vishnu and his consort Lakshmi. So Vishnu Lakshmi is neutral, the source. Brahma, the breath of life. the creator, is the positive, and Shiva, Mahadev, Maheshwara, is the negative. So here on this earth, life on earth is ruled by Mahadev, the great spirit, Maheshwara, Lord Shiva. And Shiva, or Siva in Sanskrit, means auspicious. And Shiva describes the experience of being in a body, just how amazing and ecstatic and delicious it is to be in a body, to breathe, to see, to hear, to touch, to love, to reproduce, to eat, to grow. Just incredible experience of being a body. Every moment of in this dance of learning and loving and pain is just ecstasy, divine ecstasy. We are gods and goddesses in this ecstatic bodily experience. Okay. So Shiva is this presence in this dimension. I say this is a unique dimension for your evolution because it's only in this dimension and in this experience of being in a body that we are catapulted through the suffering of this human condition into evolution. So it's this abyss of disconnect from being that drives us all through a journey of knowledge back to our self, back to our inherent divinity, back to the gifts of life that we start to experience it. So Gandhi said that truth is God. Other times he said God is truth. But what Gandhi pointed to is there is an inherent experience of the sacred that is inherent in a truthful life. So that when you're caring for this body, you experience the ecstasy of health. When you're caring for the earth, caring for a child, caring for a garden, caring for an elder, there's an ecstasy of sacred in that experience of your generosity and kindness and service and caring. When you're learning, when you're growing, when you're serving, when you're feeding people, there's an ecstasy in feeding people. That this is called dharma, the ecstasy, the inherent sacredness of life, that you know you're practicing dharma because you're in a state of ecstasy or in joy. Our natural state and our natural state of connection to sattva guna, to being, is the existential experience of being, feeling wonderful. This is your natural state, to feel wonderful, to feel filled with this wonder. And when we're not feeling wonderful, when we're not feeling great, we feel like there's something terribly wrong, and we fall into our shame, our guilt. Oh, if I only had this lover, if I only had this money, if I only had this experience, if I only had this drug, if I only had this car, everything would be okay. And we know the pain and suffering that comes from all of those. So anyway, no one talks about, we all talk about gravity. So we're talking about the importance of polarity, this field of energy moving from the source, involution coming in, and then evolution. And the root of evolution is it's not gravity, the involution, the energy coming into manifestation is gravity, being drawn down into the earth. But the real power of evolution is in levity, the return current from the earth. And the sacrum is a chalice of levity, of this uplifting energy. So Shiva is this lingam. So this ability to be in the musculoskeletal system, this incredible Shakti that is radiating from the core of the earth. The earth is very dense. And so it is the core of the earth, the molten core of the earth is entrained with Mars and is actually entrained with Jupiter. Brihaspati, great guru and beneficent, that our evolution on earth is entrained with Jupiter, and the quality of Jupiter is levity. Think about, and it's there and that's why we fall in love. We fall into the state of levity. So there's not enough awareness of levity, and levity as the Shivite foundation, and levity as a part of this human condition and the ecstasy of the human condition. So the sacrum is a chalice for this, so that the tailbone is tuned into the core of the earth. It's like an antenna that's tuned into the keynote of this molten core of the earth in Jupiter. And then it radiates up into the sacrum. And sacrum is a sacred chalice for the Shakti, for the feminine aspect of our Mother Earth, which we're using the term levity to describe this. Now, where you experience levity is a very important part of the etheric body of the Earth, and a very important part of the field dynamic. So, for instance, when salmon climb a waterfall, you're seeing the water coming down, but for everything that's going down, there's an opposite field going up in the etheric body. And the salmon are able to tune into that etheric body and climb up the levity field and do things that you would think impossible. They entrain with that etheric body, and because their scales are in a different dimension than our physical body, the water is so pure, their scales, this was the basic of Schauenberger's flying saucer work in the 19th century, his understanding of how the gills of the fish created a particular electromagnetic field around the body of the fish that allowed it to propel itself. And so he felt this was a feminine source of power, and he created a perpetual motion machine that drew from the implosion and the energy of the earth, of the levity. So anyway, I've been quite excited about levity recently, and inviting you to, again, every form is an expression of the underlying energy. So I invite you to experience where you experience levity, because I think levity is a fundamental quality of the womb, and the fundamental quality of the feminine energy, and the fundamental quality of love, which is the essence of it. But I don't think we have a language to express it. So the sacrum becomes important because this levity is the basis of the structural energy and the evolutionary energy in our body, the return currents. And also this levity is embodied in love, and we are all slaves to love.
That's beautifully put, Bruce. Thank you. There's a lot of area for consideration there. Speaking of the electromagnetic fields, as you referenced, I'd really love to hear more about your personal experience of sensing energy, of ESP, if you'd like to call it that, such as clairvoyance, and how you go about reading the field, how that might have developed over time, if you had a particular relationship to that as a child, for instance.
Well, I'm a double earth sign, so I'm ruthlessly practical. I'm very practical. You know, here and there along the way, there are chinks in the cosmic egg. You know, certainly when I was in the Theosophical Society, somebody said, "Oh, you've never seen an aura?" And he says, "Look into my third eye." And I looked in the third eye, and suddenly I'm seeing this big blue aura around him, you know, which I couldn't have done on my own, but only in the pure ethers at Adyar with somebody really, at that time, they were doing research where I think one member of the research team would take acid and the other member would chart what dimensions of consciousness he was in. They had a young, hip leader there at the Theosophical Society. I'm not sure. I don't know much about the history. Kaylor T. Wadlington was either the giver or the receiver. He's a healer, and I think still alive. He could probably tell you much more about that research. He wasn't involved with it at the time. But I've always been very, very physical, and it's taken me a lifetime to attune myself to subtle energy. Every once in a while, though, you know, I had the great blessing 2 or 3 times. You know, we were in the Garden of the Gods in the Four Corners area of New Mexico, and it was early morning, you know, when the ethers are very pure. And there was a hillside called the Old Man, And my wife said, look over there. And you could see the wrinkled face of the old man in the hillside. Suddenly all those rocks and shadows turned into this ancient being that we somehow had the good fortune to be in the presence of the old man, that we were able to see him. We had the karma to see him for an instant, But generally speaking, then another time in my life, I was with a dear friend, and he was an ISKCON devotee, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And he took us to an ISKCON community. And in the morning, in a traditional Hindu home, part of the ritual, well, every Hindu home has a planter in front of the front door with a tulsi plant in it. And so that the first energy that you experience at that door is the experience of tulsi. And each morning in the ritual, you circle that tulsi plant, and you worship the tulsi dev, the spirit, the intelligence of light, and you water the plant as you chant to the dev, to the spirit, to the intelligence. Because just like your body is a vehicle for your intelligence, for your spirit, for your essence, every plant, every animal, every being is the physical manifestation of an essence. So here you invoke the essence, the archetype, the elemental behind the tulsi plant. So in any case, suddenly I experienced tulsi dev. I experienced the elemental, and I'd never been in the presence of such a pure and sweet love, such a kindness. She's pictured as the purest devotee of Lord Krishna, and that's what I experienced in that moment. But and then on the worst day of my life, when I felt so unlovable, I was ready to kill. I was doing a friend guided me in doing some continuous breath work, some rebirthing breath work, and I experienced Krishna in that moment. So I've had these moments where my past life memories have kind of come to me and blessed me. But other than these, and I've been to India about 50 times, all sorts of pilgrimages, met all sorts of sages. My wife has a sage who was a devotee of Satya Sai Baba, and he has some interdimensional abilities. Like he puts his hand over your head, and for Booty, sacred ash he covers you with sacred ash. He can do this for like 5 minutes. We're just showering you with sacred ash, and just covered with sacred ash, and being blessed by that sort of thing. But I've always considered myself it took me a long time to tune into energy and to feel energy. And so actually I developed my system of healing based on the fact of, like the system outlined in esoteric anatomy that I teach is based on allowing you to do very effective energy balancing work while you develop a sensitivity to energy. So that right from the get-go, from the first time you do these sattvic and rajasic contacts, you experience energy, and you experience energy balancing, and you experience the fruit of that. And while you're being successful in that, you're then having the encouragement, the success to stick with it and do your own healing. And then over the years, you develop some sensitivity. So I guess I'm saying that I was not born with any sensitivity. And in fact, it took me a long time to learn cranial because I was so disturbed and ungrounded. It took me, much longer than most people because of my own, I guess, disturbance, that I created the system that no matter how damaged you are, you can help others. And then through that, heal yourself. And then over a period of time, as you purified and as you healed, develop more and more sensitivity. So I was not a natural clairvoyant or naturally sensitive in any way. All I had going for me was this one ally, which was my own pain and self-hatred.
Bruce, given that you do work with so many people, I'm wondering what's a common hurdle or hindrance for people you see regularly coming up? We're interested in informing our viewers around, what's the process look like for me, as many people are asking themselves that question. What do I do? What steps do I take? And what are the kind of hurdles you're seeing regularly people come up against as they get into a deeper healing process, a deeper, realization process? What are you seeing with people you work with?
We're talking about this gift of life, this precious sacred gift of life, which each one of us is, which you are. You are the, in my teaching, you are the face of God. You are the face of the goddess. You are the cutting edge of the unfolding of this creation. And you're made of sentience, and sentience is molecular. That your capacity to feel is so, so deep, and your sensitivity and even your vulnerability, tenderness, the delicacy, again, the depth of what we call sentience. So for each of us, it's total. And for each of us, it's this unique journey. I would think in the biggest hurdle for contemporary people is the incredible level of ignorance that's around us. You go to India and you find ashram means a place of aspiration. So you can go there and you can find other people who can support you in a sattvic way of life. I've been around for 80 years now, and I've watched an amazing journey of evolution here on this planet in the last 80 years. And the incredible spectrum of resources available to people, through the internet, the wisdom and the sages and the fools and the misdirection that's available. So there's never been so much, available to us. And yet there's never been so much misenchantment, so much to seduce us, so much to take us away. I remember at this Kumbh Mela meeting a sadhu, a renunciate who lived in the forest, and he's never seen a flashlight. Isn't that beautiful to live in that kind of innocence, And so he had lived in the jungle with, all he had was prayers and water and fire, and others with their yoga to teach him, And now he came to the Kumbh Mela, this great gathering, was picked up by some hippies who made him the center of our camp. And he said, it's important to feed people. So we went and we found the resources and we fed people.
I'm curious, Bruce, as to who you would say or name or reference as being the most influential to you in your life.
Well, I was very, 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 very lucky, because in 1984, I went back to India, again in crisis. I had started Heartwood, and it started Heartwood during my Saturn return, and it almost killed me. So I thought, it was, fortunately, grace took over. But in the process, though, I was still caught up in my pain. I went back to India, and in 75, I'd gone into the State Bank of India in Rishikesh, tried to cash some traveler's checks, waited an hour in line, and they said, I'm sorry, we don't honor them. Somebody passed some bad checks here many years ago. So 10 years later, I foolishly went back to the same bank thinking they were over it, and they weren't. So they sent me to Dehradun on an old bus. And on the way back, and in Dehradun, I was able to change some money, close to an hour away on a crummy public bus. And then on the way back, I was just miserable, praying for sanctuary. And I saw these beautiful, beautiful emerald terraces of rice in this village. And I said, wow, that's where I need to go. I need to go to these emerald terraces. So as soon as I got back to Rishikesh, I got on a rickshaw and I went back to Tapawan, ancient place of tapas, of austerity. And I remember checking into a hotel called the Om Hotel in Tapawan. It doesn't exist anymore. And in the morning, I went out for a walk, and I saw in seashells on a wall, it said Vanamali Ashram. And so I went and banged on the door, and the ashram had opened the day before, and I was the first seeker through the door. And they welcomed me, and the guru was this dear grandmother who spoke wonderful English, and her spiritual brother Mohan, and she gave me a mantra, and he gave me an enema device. and they fed me and took me in. And she's been my teacher all this quarter century. And I've been very special. The ashram, like a 5 rupee note that you tape on the wall. So I'm their 5 rupee note, and they've been very, very kind to me. And Vanamali Mataji is a very pure sage, and she's written a tremendous number of books in English. So that if you're interested in the wisdom of India and you're looking for a really authentic and lucid and deep, her books are as deep as you are, and yet they're charming and entertaining and magical. And they're published by Bear Inner Traditions, so they're very easy to find. You'll find them at Amazon, every bookshop, you'll find them used. So she has books on the life of Krishna and the life of Hanuman. She has a wonderful book called Shakti. So I highly recommend Vanamali Mataji. If you go to my website, weareone.us, WERE, the numeral 1.us, you'll find links to Vanamali Ashram, Vanamali, VANAMALI. Tremendous, tremendous doorway. Then the other teacher who's really instrumental, I had the good fortune to be led to Papaji, Harilal Punja, in the early 1990s when we were just a few of us in his kitchen. I even had the good fortune to do Polarity Therapy with him and to pull on his toes. He commented that not since his wrestling coach had anyone pulled on his toes the way I had. He was having a lot of trouble with his legs, and helped him with those tamasic contacts. But Papaji had the ability to facilitate Satori. And though I didn't really have that direct experience because I was too desperate, I got in my own way. I couldn't really surrender. His aura, the aura of ecstasy, and the time with him and his wisdom have certainly been fundamental in my evolution. So those are 2 of the most important sages. But it's really the whole sweeping majesty of the Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana means older than time itself, and Dharma is an experience of the sacred. So I'm very grateful for the journey that I am on, just as you are having your journey, that we are all the face of the goddess on a journey to find our way home to our inherent divinity. So I guess it's experiential. And to understand that the goal is something that you have within you right now, that I'm talking about a state of feeling wonderful as your natural state, a state of feeling grateful as your natural state, that what you're seeking, you already have. And to cling to the things that facilitate your feeling wonderful and feeling grateful, and to stay away from people or elements of your environment that rob you of your connection with being, rob you of your inherent experience of your inherent divinity.
Thank you so much, Bruce. We're very grateful to have you on here, and it's amazing to hear what a life you've lived and what wisdom you have to share, and bringing it all back around from the first question around suffering and identity, and bringing it back in again to that isn't just a philosophy, but that's actually an experience. So important for everybody to know that this isn't about talking, it's about the being, about deepening that.
Well, the universe is giving itself away. The universe is very, very generous, just like a flower or a tree, just infinite, infinite, infinite blessings. And you are a part of that blessing, and all the gifts that define you, of your humor and your creativity and your capacity to love and your intelligence, are all the face of this gift. And we experience our inherent divinity, this levity, this grace that we are in our own generosity. So I just invite you to be generous, that there's, again, that life is God, and that in our inherent caring for this gift, or our inherent generosity, caring and sharing, we become part of this gift, part of this flow of grace. That all of these things are within you and happen naturally in your day-to-day experience if you just recognize them for what they are. And again, we are divine beings having this materialistic experience, but it doesn't really have to be materialistic.
What a great closing sentiment, Bruce. That's couldn't ask for anything better. You mentioned your website, www.weareone, that's the numeral 1.us. As we move to a close here, we'd love for you to tell the listeners about any upcoming projects you have or classes, if they'd like to connect with you.
Well, I guess I have a class in September near Nevada City at Ananda Sagara, Karuna Sagara, Ocean of Compassion, Karuna Sagara. That's the only thing I really have on my calendar. If someone wants to organize a course in India, I'll come and I'll teach. Or if you have a couple, I don't really want to do much carbon footprint. I just taught a course in Costa Rica. I was down there. I did it as a benefit for their wonderful, wonderful teacherless school, a schoolless school there, Casa Sula, and I put it all on YouTube. So if you go to Bruce Berger, B-U-R-G-E-R, on YouTube, and get past the other Bruce Bergers, the German comedian and the American rabbi, you'll see these recent classes in Costa Rica where I really have a chance to rave about the mystery and rave about the unity and divinity of all life and talk about the power of therapeutic presence as the essence of healing and elaborate on these themes. So I hope after this, there'll be a wave of interest in these YouTube videos. But I think we're moving and I'm having to deal with a lot at the moment. And so I'm not really taking on too much, but I don't know, if you have a dozen, 15 people and you'd like me to come somewhere and teach, I might consider it. Especially if you want to meet in India. I think I have one more trip to India left in me before I say, no, this is too much of a carbon footprint. But otherwise, check it out on YouTube. I'm always raving about the unity and divinity of all life. I don't know of anything more important to talk about. And I feel like this is the key to healing is cultivating and basking in Shiva, your own ecstatic experience of the sacredness of your own delicious life. Om Namah Shivaya. God is blessed. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Bruce. True honor.
Thank you so much, Bruce. Really grateful to have you on. Thanks for listening. You can find us at fielddynamicshealing.com.